Okay, should we have the flag pledge then? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to ask, or
You just touch it. Oh,
it should come on.
not working.
Sorry about that.
It might be dead.
Here, I'll put this one between us, Frank. Oh, there you got
Okay.
it.
Chair Ames,
Here.
Commissioner Bees,
Here.
Commissioner Happela,
Here.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Here.
Commissioner Lewis,
Here.
Commissioner Pirro.
Here.
Mayor Pilon, as I indicated earlier, is unable to make it this evening. He's got a family issue to attend to. He wishes you a great and productive meeting. He says this is the first time in 16 years that he has missed attending a liaison. Pretty amazing, I'd say.
I got beat
Huh?
47 years and I haven't missed a meeting.
Is that right? Okay, you braggart. No, good for you. Good for you.
Okay,
Thank you, by the way.
we've taken a roll call, but I think we all should introduce ourselves to Commissioner Lewis here and tell a little bit about our background. And she tells us a little bit about her background, okay?
Question. When did she get voted in?
Was it the last?
Yes, it was at the June City Council meeting.
Oh, the council meeting, we didn't come through here at all.
Yeah, the Planning Commission does not fill its own vacancies
I
except.
thought we interviewed people.
Pardon me?
I thought we interviewed them.
Oh, we did in the past.
Did you?
Yep.
I can't comment as to the
Okay.
past.
So she
There-
was
There is a
interviewed.
process now that's been laid out by the City Council, which we followed. We had two applicants, both very good applicants. City Council interviewed them, actually appointed them kind of informally that night, and then we put it on the City Council agenda for the June meeting for the purpose of making sure we had a resolution. Now we can document her term of office, because folks, I've been having a hard time finding out when your terms are. And, because that's the sort of thing we have to use to plan with. So eventually there'll be resolutions for each person who's appointed.
Okay. I was just curious, because it had come through us before. I was
Frank?
curious.
Frank, what date do you go by? The city council meeting date or tonight or what?
Honestly, I don't remember.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I thought it was the City Council meeting date because,
Yeah, probably is.
Okay, we'll start with Commissioner
Yeah. Hey, Jamie. Marty Bees. I've been here in Nowthen for about 25 years now, I think. And yeah, just appointed to the commission last year, so relatively new, but been in town for quite a while.
Okay. Oh, that's right, there's nobody else over there. Sorry. I'm like, well, that's it. I'm Kelly Pirro. I've been here my entire life, grew up here, raised here. Been on multiple commissions throughout the city. I've been on the Planning and Zoning Commission now for 6 years, maybe 7. Can't quite remember for sure, but roughly in there.
Okay.
Dan Hoppel and I was appointed last year, same time with Marty, and been in Malvern since 2019.
You live in Melvin too, just south of town here.
We had 3 new members last year and Lars is not here tonight.
Yeah, where is he?
He's out of town.
He's out of town.
Okay.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
I've lived in Nowthen 40-some years, and I've been on the P&Z 20-something. We're not too sure. Have to look back, but been here around here quite a while. So, and before that, I lived in Ramsey. So, been locally, been around for about 50 years. So.
Yeah, Harold and Dale are your go-to guys for historic information.
If they don't know about it, I've probably heard about it at one point.
I've lived here probably, I'm not sure, maybe 60-some years. And like I stated earlier, I've been on the commission for 47 years. I was chairman the last 17, I can't keep track of it anymore. But, tell a little bit about yourself and your background.
This October, it'll be 6 years that we moved here from Becker. I'm originally from the Walker area up north.
Oh, great.
I grew up there, moved to Becker and graduated there my senior year. Lived there for about 15 or 16 years, and then we moved here. We still have our house in Becker. One of our daughters lives there. But absolutely love this community and all that it has to offer out here. We have 5 children. I am a general contractor, and we live in the round barn. Well, not in the round barn, but we own the round barn.
Oh,
Oh, that's right.
So-
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I see you were painting that the other day.
I just got off the lift. I was like, I gotta get in the shower. I gotta spun some paint on myself. Yeah.
Welcome to our planning and zoning here. We'll go on with our meeting now. What we're going to do is approve or amend tonight's meeting agenda of June 28, 2022. Would somebody like to make a motion for this? Approve it? Okay, Commissioner Commissioner Heppel made the motion. Would somebody like to second the motion?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Jorgen is the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Sometimes if there's a phone or something. Yeah, maybe it is that.
Maybe it's that one. It's really bad. Oh, is the podium on? Whew. Okay. Here it comes again.
Try the one here in the podium.
Is the podium one on since you're up?
no.
Okay, that's a good start.
We've never had that before.
Not since I've been.
That's the most it's ever done.
Still there.
I don't know.
Okay, we'll go on and with the next thing, we're going to approve or amend the meeting minutes of April 26, 2022. Would somebody like to make this motion?
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Commissioner Perro made the motion. Somebody like to second
I'll
this?
second.
Commissioner B seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, yes.
I have one comment.
Okay, go and make comment then.
It just, there's just a typo in the, section 2. Septic is misspelled, so. Minor detail.
What were they? I'm sorry.
On, section 2,
Number 2.
on
Okay.
the bold print, where it says variance for septic system.
Oh, septic.
Septic.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Correct that.
Okay, with the correction on the typo. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, the first thing we're going to start is discussion of the architect standards and other sites designs critical related to the commercial industrial uses. And we'll turn this over to our planner, Stockman.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get my pointer up here. Well, anyway, okay, so for Jamie's sake, yeah, we've been working on these commercial industrial architectural standards to try to define better what we're looking for in the commercial industrial areas. especially the commercial areas, which would be, along Viking, and as the city grows, we add new commercial developments. We want to be sure those are high quality, incorporating brick and stone, and we don't allow any metal in the commercial districts, as opposed to like industrial districts, which are more storage, manufacturing, and production. Those can be apportioned metal. So our goals tonight are to finalize this draft ordinance. The city attorney has informed us that we cannot extend the moratorium, so it technically ends on July 13th. The next council meeting is July 19th. We don't have any pending commercial or industrial applications right now, so we're in okay shape. So we need to decide if we make a recommendation tonight and send it to the council and hold a public hearing there, or if we should hold a public hearing at next month's planning and zoning meeting. So as we called, or Frank had sent an email out to the P&Z members, and we got comments back. So those were incorporated in the current draft dated 6/21. And so really, the first section defines the building materials, and then the following section defines the colors. So we have percentages of building materials on the outside of the building, and we have percentages of different colors that are allowed on a building. So those are two separate things. On page 4, we have the suggestion that we go down in C1 on page 4, under exterior material colors. It was suggested that for the primary or principal color scheme, we change from 90% down to 80% of any building exterior for both commercial and industrial uses. And then the remaining 20% can be accent colors. So what we're looking for is, the majority of these buildings are earth tones, subtle colors, neutral colors, or muted colors that complement the surrounding area, environment, and landscape. And then we are proposing to allow the 20% being, the sign on the building, trim, possibly, awnings or accent roof colors, shutters, etc., to kind of break up the mass of the building and still allow some architectural interest to the commercial industrial uses. So we'll propose that 80% and 20% for the accents, and then deleting the neutral colors statement, which was really just kind of defining what neutral was anyway, so that has to come out. And then in C3, instead of may, we always want to say shall, which is required instead of optional. And then Commissioner Hapola recommended fade resistant, which is a good recommendation. Contrasting colors or color enhancement and tonal variations. So we're looking for accents and entryways, awnings, doors, windows, columns, etc. And then on number 4 there, we removed the word gray and changed it to untreated or untinted concrete. So we don't want any just plain poured concrete. It has to be tinted or, covered in some other exterior finish. Any questions on that page? Or does anyone oppose the 80-20?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Hippo.
yes, I agree with the changes, as they're noted, 80-20 and all the other changes.
Okay, thanks.
I do too.
Everybody's good there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Then moving on. The next page really, that's already been in our ordinance for the most part, which represents, so as you look at the grade of the different materials, the grade A is the highest, which is either glass, stone, or brick. So we only allow grade A, B, and C in commercial areas, whereas industrial areas, we allow A, B, C, and D. We do not allow any vinyl siding in either district. Only vinyl is allowed in the residential areas.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Barrow.
I actually would like some, I've had, gone around and around with myself on letter E on this page. What are we talking about when it says window and door trim? Flashing and other trim, what is that actually going to, what does that mean?
So that means that we don't count the trim as part of the 80%. The trim is the
I understand the
accent.
glass, but why not the trim around the windows?
If the trim matches, if the trim's the same color as the 80%, which is like a tan or whatever,
Yeah, the majority
then
color.
it's kind of ignored.
Okay,
If it's a color, a different color, then we count it as the 20%,
okay,
okay? Which is a different trim color. So, if the
That's how
garage
this is
doors,
written.
for instance, match the main color, we don't count that as a accent color.
okay, so while you're saying that, that's where I've ran into my contradiction of what does this say? Because this doesn't, somehow this is not written to say that in a way. And that's what I'm confused with. And that's what I've been confused with on
So
this
if you
letter.
had like a storage.
No, I'm
unit-
saying the way this
Yeah,
is written.
Right, but if you had a storage unit that had 6 garage doors on the front, they would not be counted towards the main color if they were,
Red
or whatever the main color was.
Yeah,
If it was all the same color, they wouldn't really count.
they blend in, right? So
Yeah.
it also has to do, Kelly, with material because, the window
Yes.
trims are many times,
Aluminum or
vinyl
metal.
clad, right?
Yep.
Which is nice, and it's an exception because we're not allowing vinyl on the walls, but we're allowing, some,
Okay, so I guess that's where I'm just trying, this part just really throws me for a loop because it doesn't, it says an exception, but then it's also part of, so that's why I was just baffled by how this
Shall be
is written. Yeah,
so maybe we should specify exception to material.
To primary.
and it says something about the primary color at the bottom, but that doesn't coincide with everything in front of it, that's why I'm like, what is going on? Help me make sense out of this, everybody, because,
Garage doors, pedestrian doors, window and door trim, flashing, and other trim shall not constitute required materials that make up the exterior finish for the purposes of this section. So a lot of times, the garage doors are metal, right? We don't allow metal in the commercial district, but we would allow a metal garage door in a commercial industrial area. So that's why it's an exception, and the vinyl clad windows are an exception.
and this is how you guys, the rest of you interpret this? Because I had a hard time interpreting it, how you're telling me.
Okay.
I really did not interpret it this way. That's what I'm so confused by.
Okay, well,
I
maybe
know.
I can give it some thought and try to clarify.
Why is it chair? Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Pepple.
I think we could move, or split it into two parts maybe, and move the required material exception to be under section A. And we talk about material.
Well, that's right. No, this is an exception there. So why would, we don't wanna move it, do we? No.
Well, or else we could break it into multiple phrases.
That's what I was hoping we could do to make it more,
If E is gonna include all exceptions,
We
maybe
could-
it needs to say materials that make up garage doors, pedestrian doors, window door trim, flashing, and other trims.
Do we need to separate the material from the color aspect of it?
this has been in here. So
Yeah.
This is primarily,
Agreed, but it doesn't make, what you just explained makes sense, but what I'm reading here doesn't follow with what you just said. That's my contradiction right now.
well, but you have to think about what's accepted, right? It's not, so,
You do kind of see what I'm saying, like, it's saying that these things are exceptions, but then it turns around and says something about, consistent with primary colors and materials. So it's actually trying to make all these things part of those two sections without,
okay, yeah, well, let's do this then. I like Martin's idea of putting an exception under the material section and then putting a different exception to color, if you want to allow it, under the color section. Or we just say exception to material and color requirements. So, and then maybe break it down into, a couple of bullet statements or something.
is it also like putting exception in the middle of the section seems like it should probably be at the end.
yeah, and that's where I'm like, okay, it makes sense there.
You still have a lot of sections after.
Well, if we
Lot of
specify
letters.
exceptions, we can also specify the exact section that you're accepting. That's not uncommon to just have it follow. Because it does not apply to the sections after it necessarily. So,
Be number 6 on material.
What do you mean?
Section
Number 4? Isn't there number 4?
A6.
it would have to be B, it wouldn't be,
I was talking about A.
Six.
Oh, I'm sorry, misunderstanding. A.
A,
Oh,
A6,
no, it couldn't be a, well, I guess it could.
it'd be an exception of material. Or half of the,
Yeah, but it says allowed building materials shall be divided into categories as follows.
Yeah, that
So
one
I would
there.
probably make it B instead of, and then go down the line and change C, D. But maybe we just keep it as
E.
materials then? 'Cause, well, the
Yes,
color,
I'd
I mean,
make
the
it-
color thing is,
it's an exception to material type, so it seems like it could fit into materials.
yeah, that's the way it was intended. But it, I mean, the same concept can be applied to colors though. Because it's not an accent color, it's the same as most of the exterior.
You're gonna put an exception in there to both those then?
I think that might be the best unless we just specify exception.
so I guess when you explained it and you said it was the material of what the door is made up of, that makes sense to me. And I think maybe it's just written backwards in this way because it's trying to combine two sections into the exception when it's one giant sentence, maybe. So maybe it's just a moving of words, literally. Materials that make up garage doors, pedestrian doors, window door trim, flashing, and other trim shall not be considered for the building purposes in this section. And then another sentence following that would be something about the color accents and how those things coordinate with the colors. I think we just need to break it up, I think. Is that helpful? Because at least it points out the
that makes
material,
sense.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys, but I had a huge problem with this. This was way too much going into one sentence, and I'm like, I don't know what it is. I don't understand it.
Well, yeah, ordinances have to be clear, so if it's not clear, we gotta make it so.
So if we call it out as the materials that make up the doors, shall not be considered for the purposes of this section, and then we follow it up with colors will be considered if they are not consistent with the primary for all these said above. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to break that down. I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, we already say under the section C, which is material colors, that color accent considerations are contrasting colors, tonal variation, etc. So yeah, let's just split it up. I'll put them under the appropriate sections, and then it won't be like a new concept when you read it later, right?
Okay. Yeah, I just had a hard time making sense out of all of that and why it was so too much going on at one time.
Yes. So it could exception really only reference the material,
I think so.
because the color is not an exception, it still applies.
Only if it's not the
see,
primary.
Well, the trim is, it still could, like doors, if there's the same color as the walls, they're not an exception. But if they're a color accent, so maybe that part's just,
Maybe that does fall under letter C, number 3.
I'll tie it into, yeah, that number 3
Good call.
there.
If it is the primary color, it still could count towards the 80%,
Well, yeah,
so it wouldn't be an exception.
got it. Okay. Thank you for indulging me in that clarification.
Okay, I'll work through that part.
I like the idea of putting it under 3, the color part of it.
That'll help.
Yeah.
It gets all the color right there. Done.
Right.
It's easier to follow the ordinance if they're all in one spot.
Okay. And the exception being still in E, just stating that the material is an exception. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense to me.
Maybe E should be right after the material section, so it's all in one place instead of being
Yeah, that's
4
what,
letters later.
Maybe, yeah. Right. That's not a material color, it's just a material in general. So that would have to
Would turn
be,
into C and then everything shifts down.
yeah, that's exactly. Mm-hmm. A and D.
Material, actual material would be section A.
Yes, it is A, but then there's B is a sub-material.
yeah, it would have to go as B for exceptions.
Okay.
It can't be listed under A. The way
B
it's
Okay.
B becomes C.
She can work on that
Right.
detail.
renumbered.
Have fun with that detail.
Yeah, that's
Word
fine,
does
I
it
get it.
automatically.
Word does this one. Yeah, sure it does.
Well, now that I'm reading it, let's see. We threw in exterior colors sort of in the middle of the material section, so maybe I just need to move that little color section down.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
As we go further, yeah.
Because then it picks up again on other materials, so, yeah, maybe the thing to do is just to move that. Okay, well, we'll figure that out. On page 6, I had a couple comments. We had this one recommended change on that page, which was saying post frame instead of pole style building. But under I at the top of page 6, that first section, architectural standards and the development review process, should be bold.
Oh, okay.
And then in J2, structures must create a visual interest that is consistent with the community's identity and character. Well, if once somebody asks, what is the identity and character? You know, I mean, that's kind
Right.
of,
And
so,
are we gonna change the word must to shall?
yeah, it wouldn't hurt, to do that. Must is better than may, but, so somehow I think we should define our, you know, what kind of identity are we looking for? And what's our character, if we want to call it sort of a rural, you know, farm influence with some, you know, I don't know how you guys have lived here, maybe just kind of hearing how you'd like to see the sort of central business area, knowing that we have some existing buildings, but also quite a few lots that could accommodate new development. And we've already stated that we like, you know, a more typical roof or some sort of a peaked roof.
I mean, this number 2 there seems like that's the whole structure of the whole document, right? I mean, the whole purpose of defining this stuff is so that they have a interest that is consistent with the identity and character.
Right, I think we
So-
sort of should list some things under identity and character of what we're looking for.
I think that's what we're following then in number 3.
Is it just redundant?
It is. Number 3 then calls out
Yeah.
vestibules, you know, adjacent from streets, peaked roofs, arches, canopies, all that stuff. And then you just keep following it down, it just keeps tying it all in.
Well, but the overall identity and character to me is different than the specific architectural recommendations or requirements.
My concern is that with this community's identity and character, if we put too much detail into it, we're gonna push for exactly what we wanna see versus what a building, an actual builder wants to do. So they may have a plan that's already set in stone, they come in and they have to completely redo it just because we want it to have a farm feel. Or we want it to have a cottagey feel, or whatever it is. And I don't know that we're a city big enough to demand that because we don't have the population to say, no, we don't want you here because you have the wrong feel for us. I think if they want to come in, we got to try to work with them to make it work with us too. Because the more revenue we can get in through commercial and industrial building, the more people we'll eventually have out here too. It's just, it's all reciprocal, and we can't, I feel if we narrow it down too much, we're a new small city. And I just feel if we narrow it down too much, we're asking too much out of companies that want to come in here. And that's my concern.
Well, yeah, I agree with that, and I also think that it's a moment in time, right? I mean, if we had written this in the 1980s, what's consistent with the identity and character in the 80s would look really out of place right now.
Completely different, agreed.
Well,
Yeah.
part of the
So-
challenge is we don't have, you know, real historic desirable buildings,
Right.
right, that we're trying to
Preserve.
preserve. and
We're
to
sitting in one.
Sort of rep-
We're
This-
sitting in one.
This is it.
What?
It's probably the only one, isn't
Or what?
it?
Harvey's?
This building?
Oh, this and
Yeah,
Harvey's.
hard, yeah, the Greenberg.
Okay, so tell me this then, what if someone came in with an ultra contemporary design, then what would you do?
All glass.
We have one right there. Just down the road with the one sloped roof. That's pretty contemporary looking right now. for this area.
It is, and that, see,
Yeah.
that was not prohibited at the time.
Yeah, and I don't think there is a reason why it should be. And it's not,
If it met all of the requirements we
Yeah.
had as far as the entrance and the
Breaking up the.
interest and the, yeah, I mean, I would probably be okay. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know that it has a defined entrance on that one. Like, a lot of the businesses around here do, they kind of have like, a covered canopy area. I don't know that they do, but something along that lines, I think, would look nice to it anyways, but that's, you know, what we overlooked at the time. But I think that we're on the right path here, just I feel like we're getting way too ahead of ourselves.
Well, I mean, I don't know, I mean, you don't have to feel bad is what I'm saying about establishing, these standards. I mean, you have the right to do that.
Yeah,
So, yeah, if you're more concerned about the quality, which we've covered,
yeah.
and sort of the look as far as like blank walls versus walls with windows or whatever, you know, that's fine. But then see that identity and character thing is just so undefined, I don't know, you know, I don't know.
I mean, maybe it is redundant.
yeah, I guess my recommendation would just be to strike 2 altogether.
Or just say that they must create visual interest.
We have that in the next one.
Yeah, I think
Significant
we
entrance.
defined that
Well, that's an entrance.
very well, actually. I think we defined that
Okay.
afterwards, yeah. I don't know, that's my opinion.
Okay. I would be all right with that.
Okay.
Does everybody agree, or?
I feel like it's redundant, so I'm okay with pulling it.
I think it's kind of an arbitrary phrase.
I agree with that too.
Yeah.
It's not really enforceable.
Okay. Are we scratching it?
I heard 3. Not enough.
I think 3 covers it.
That's enough.
3 out of 5.
So we had 4, at least 4 that were wanting to strike it, is what Frank was saying, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and then number 4, where we're saying commercial buildings which have ground floor facades that face public streets, that's where we require windows and entries and awnings. Do you, or is it your desire to have, if they back up to a street and they gain access from another street, both sides, the way you're thinking about it, have to be, abide by that, right?
You're saying like a corner lot?
A corner lot or the
full
lots
block.
across Viking that might back up to Viking, but have a local street access on the other side. That kind of thing. So, in other words, you know, if there's a trail or the potential for pedestrians, a lot of buildings nowadays have sort of a back entry and a front entry. So you don't have just a back kind of ugly side, right, facing the road. We want it to look nice as we drive down Viking, as well as from maybe the main entrance on the local street side. That's just what I would just clarifying that, because this would, the way it's written, you know, any building
Public
side
street.
that faces a public street,
Not a city street.
well, no, both.
Or private, or it would be a
County or
private.
local, yeah.
It would be a
county or
private
local.
parking area or a private street.
I think it's consistent with materials because that same concept applies to the materials. You can't have just concrete block on one side, you know, and then brick on the other. You've got to have a consistent finish all around for the most part.
We can plural streets, or street to,
It does say public streets.
Yeah, okay. I just want to be sure that
Or
everybody.
do we say commercial buildings shall have ground floor facades that face public streets that contain windows, entry areas, and so that it kind of says
It's a
you
requirement.
shall have that
Yeah.
on every public street.
Yeah, that's great. No, I
That
think
works.
even just changing that word helps.
Shall and that.
So it's singular in section 3. It says adjacent public street, and then in section 4, it says public streets. So
Okay.
But, oh, yeah,
Yeah, we can make them plural.
public streets, yes.
You know, there's a regional trail planned along this part of Viking.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can imagine, let's say you're on the trail and you want to stop in at one of the businesses, you know, it'd be nice to have like a bike rack and a bench and a door on the Viking side, even though if you're in a car, you'd probably go around the other side. So I just wanted to be sure we were all on the same page with that. Everybody's good, or is there hesitation? It's not uncommon, so I think people coming in, it's a very common ordinance requirement to have any side facing a public street. You know, they're all the nice sides. More consistent with the rest of the building.
yeah, so section 3 probably should be reworded a little bit, and it's at least one from the adjacent public streets, or street.
At least
So-
one, so you have to have one, but if you only have one main entrance.
Oh, yeah, at least one entrance. They
at
could have
least
two.
one.
So if
They could opt to do a real flat front and the peaked entrance in the back, maybe, kind of a deal. Who knows?
So they could have one
Or you could
peaked
say,
entrance, and then the other one has, I don't know if that requires them to put a second entrance or not. It's not.
That, yeah, it's not really
It's not
required
clear,
then.
but-
Yeah.
I think that's a good example of something that would vary site to site, that you could comment on at the time of approval. Or you could say one visually significant entrance for each
Public street.
public street side, or something like that. You know, usually
Well, that could make a
That would make.
house, one on the corner have 3, and that could be really challenging.
So maybe at least,
at least one is,
Yeah, I think we're covering it.
maybe at most 2 required.
say what?
Maybe we could say at most 2 are required.
Because then they
So you
can't
wouldn't
do
have
3
to have-
sides.
You won't have to do 3.
Yeah. Unless, well, yeah. Okay.
I think at least one makes the most sense,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah,
not everybody's gonna need two.
I mean, if you've got a commercial building, you're trying to get people in there, so I think
They're gonna be open to it.
On number 5, the multi-use,
Yeah, I caught that space.
but grouped on larger sites and coordinated among separate sites.
So you can have multiple buildings on a single lot,
Yep.
or you can have a single building with different owners on separate lots, but you can still tie in the landscaping, sidewalks.
Oh, is that what
Connect-
that's referring
yeah,
to?
Connect parking lots, et cetera.
Oh, yeah. That would be like consistent with the next building.
Yeah, so it looks like a coordinated
Coordinated.
development, right?
kind of like Arbor Lakes.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what this meant by coordinated.
And in our frontage road study too, we, you know, how they, on the north side of Viking here, where they share driveway all along Viking, sort of like a frontage road. That area in front of Fleetwood there would have to be kind of treated the same.
Yep. Okay.
Let's see,
I don't have any issues with the rest.
The only other, so in number 8 on that page, we've got visual and physical links shall be established between commercial buildings through site planning, amenities, architecture, exterior spaces, etc. But we didn't put in parking or access drives. Maybe we should add that, or do you think?
That's gonna have to be per site, isn't it? Because, I mean, we don't know what's coming and how big and how many, and
Yeah.
that's gonna be a hard thing to. I mean, they're already gonna have to link together. You can't just
Yeah.
drop a driveway in somewhere. You gotta link them together somehow, so I'm not too concerned
Not
with
worried
that.
about that?
No. I'd like to see one put one between the buildings. Would be interesting.
I have a comment number 6. It says, windows should be generously used. That seems not, specific to some value.
Well, see, windows are a way to break up a facade or a solid wall. They're also a type A material, so they count as type A.
So I was wondering what generous means. Is that 10% or 90%?
Well, I don't think we could pin down exactly a percent for windows, yeah. But it's more versus material and kind of the look.
Yeah, so. Some businesses just have a door on a block wall, which is obviously not generous.
They gotta figure out their type A materials pretty good then, don't they?
Yeah. Could be a brick wall, I guess.
You know,
Move down to K.
yeah. Okay. So I think I read through it again, thinking this is just industrial standards. You know, if we get any sort of kickback on this, it's gonna probably be item 3, which sort of, you know, requires breaking up those facades, maybe varying the height of the different sections of building, etc., which of course adds cost. But in thinking about the whole picture, I mean, I don't, you know, I still think we have a good niche here for this kind of the startup businesses, and still not as stringent of requirements necessarily than some of the suburbs. But, so we're talking about a 1:5 ratio of the horizontal masses, height to width ratio, versus a 1:3 ratio for the commercial. So in other words, we allow for a 10-foot height, we allow a 50-foot wall length before they have to either jog it or change the height or the materials or something. Does that seem doable?
So that would be like a 100-foot building with an entrance in the middle.
Yeah.
One on each end.
You could add 1 to 5, and then the entrance
Yeah.
breaks it up.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's a fairly large building.
But that's industrial stuff for you.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
Yeah.
think about it.
I think in number 3, you can actually get rid of both overpowering and monolithic and just say mass, scale, and uniform appearance of large unadorned walls. I don't know if anyone agrees with that.
Oh, let me see that again. So take out what, sorry?
Take out the overpowering and monolithic, so just say to reduce the mass, scale, and uniform appearance of large unadorned walls.
I agree with moving overpowering.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's an
monolithic I
interpretation.
had already taken out of there, I think, at least.
okay. Through the use
So
of
that's-
detail and scale. Detail and. Is scale the right word? Wait, is that right? I mean, is that the right word?
Detail and scale.
Yeah, I think so. I think,
You know how I think scale's fine.
Okay,
You know,
Just-
where the entry's a little higher or
okay.
pronounced, I guess.
Did you want to do the facades must provide an architectural rhythm? You want to change that to shall again?
Sure. That's good.
probably a comma after provide.
Well,
Well,
we
we-
had taken,
We struck out that,
we struck out through the use of detail and scale, because that was.
Oh, okay.
That was
Actually,
moved
I
up,
moved
yeah.
it up, I
Yeah.
moved it
Gotcha,
up a
okay.
bit, yeah. So facades shall provide an architectural rhythm through changes in roof lines, texture, color, or trim.
Doesn't that just say the same thing as what you just moved? Unadorned walls to the use of detail and scale, doesn't that say the same thing?
Mass scale, uniform appearance, roof lines, texture, color, trim, no?
No?
I think the second part is okay. It's saying they have to follow,
Just almost
Yep.
like suggestions on how to
Okay.
break up the unadorned walls.
I think you avoid putting two different styles of facades in.
Yeah.
One question I had too was a lot of times it's beneficial to add some photos or some sketches. Would you be open to doing that? I haven't done that.
In this
till now.
section, for just the letter K?
Well, just generally kind of throughout,
Oh,
if, or should we just, sometimes you'll see like little black and white sketches, just showing the varied roof lines
Yeah.
and such.
we did that with the roof lines. It's
Yeah,
on here.
That would.
Yeah, similar.
Doing more of that.
Where? For what?
Well, just to say, when we're talking about breaking up, you know, how the different sections.
You mean like the 1 to 3 and the 1 to 5 scale?
Or we
Giving
could
giving
give
them an idea?
example of a height
That would be
and width
fine, yeah,
ratio.
that works. Yeah, that works
It might
fine.
help to put a not allowed style one in or something.
Yeah, like a 10-foot tall, 30-foot long, and show where you kind of want a window, I guess. Yeah, I guess that makes
Just
sense.
some simple sketches.
For those that like the pictures.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll see what the council thinks.
I mean, I don't think we have to get crazy or nothing.
No. I don't think so. Let's see. So, on number 6, K6, large spans of wall space may not face public streets and shall incorporate design features to provide architectural interest. Or how about large spans of wall space may not face public streets unless, well, because if they're incorporating design features, I mean, that's what we want facing the,
Is that the same as 2?
yeah, it's, single large dominant building mass.
It's clarifying that public streets need to be for sure, have something on it,
Dealt with.
on the wall.
Well,
Well, and if this is industrial,
It's
we're gonna require landscaping and fencing.
Where there's
To block
difference
it
of,
anyway,
yeah,
right?
where there's a difference of,
Yeah.
zoning is all.
Well, we could just say that too, is large spans of wall space. Large spans of
Maybe you could-
solid wall space may not face public streets without
The one.
A, incorporating design features, or B, landscaping and screening or something like that. Or just keep it simple, large spans of solid wall space may not face public streets.
That's super simple, and I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
Better, okay.
yeah,
Simple is better.
yeah, we can always come back
Straight
and
in.
fix if we need to. But,
Okay. Item L was already in there, let's see. 3 at the top of page 8. We just added screening of roof-mounted mechanical equipment from view to adjacent properties and public rights-of-way to the extent feasible was added.
That seems-
The use of varied roof lines is encouraged. Flat roofs are permitted if they blend with adjacent structures, are sufficiently disguised through the use of parapet walls, or as may be approved by the city council as part of an architectural design. That's fair, leaves the option open at least.
yeah,
Okay, let's see, and then I added that in 4, stole the letter I clause there about burying utilities underground for all new buildings, and if any buildings are expanded 50% or more.
one thing I have with that, only, like, very simple. The whole utilities, there's only one thing that we actually currently have. Do we really have a good internet source right now that everyone is using and it's underground?
Well, no, we will, I mean,
We hope to, yes, we
Yeah.
hope to. But we don't have like cable, so it's just, right now, it's just electrical, right?
well,
And
fiber
gas.
optic they're putting in.
Yeah, they have that coming. But those are the only two utilities right now that we have.
There's natural gas too,
Gas will come to.
It's not here yet.
propane tanks. And,
That's why I'm like, read this and I'm thinking, we're a little ahead of ourselves on this one. We don't have a lot of these options yet. That's where I'm concerned, like,
Well, electric too, I mean, is a big
Yeah.
deal. If we get rid of the power poles, it really does help
Yeah.
visually.
yeah, it does.
I guess a little bit at a time is,
I know, it's like, oh. But I just was like, the only services that I know of right now is the phone, fiber optic, and the electrical right now, so it's kind of hard to,
and most developers or builders are just doing that automatically.
I know, so it's so much nicer in visual for them too.
We're okay leaving it in, or?
Yeah, I just think it's a little early. We don't have much to work with.
But it's coming though.
It's coming, I know.
May not be that far away.
I'd like it to be sooner than it's probably gonna be, but you never know.
Okay, the only other change at the bottom, M2, was may instead of shall, or rather the other way around, shall instead of may. And then N, you see another exception, and that was intended for materials So if it's an essential service, they don't need to meet, well, it's a conditional use permit, so the city could alter what the requirements are potentially. But if they're trying to have an exception to material standards, the applicant shall have the burden of demonstrating that the building maintains quality in design and materials, that the materials are compatible with other structures, and that the justification is not based on economic considerations. I think across the street here, the Perkins building, they utilized that through a CUP. It's the only one I know of in 11 or 12 years. Other than that, I gotta get a parking lot dimension table in here.
I have a silly question. What are the dimensions we're gonna use? Because some of the newer stuff is so tight, you can barely get out of your vehicle.
Oh, we have, it's an older table. It's,
Is it?
They're 9 by 20 with a 22-foot drive aisle.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's, they're good size.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the parking lots are so tight.
Oh, even when you park next to a small vehicle, you're like, this is not cool.
Okay, so does the commission want to move it along? Do we feel like?
Yeah, with all those changes, I think it looks good.
You know, worst
Feels
case,
good.
you know, it's part of the ordinance, so if we see something at a later date, we can always, you know, change it or. We do still want to make changes to our landscape section, I think, and a couple other minor things. So, then we would look for a recommendation to move this on to city council.
So quick question, is that, you're gonna rewrite all this and then you're bringing it to council, or we're holding a public hearing for
Well,
the changes?
yeah,
Which is it?
we could do it either way. The moratorium ends on the 13th. The next council meeting is not until the 19th.
Yep,
And your next meeting's, I don't know. July.
20-something.
Yeah, 20-something. We don't have any pending requests right now, so.
I'm just wondering if we want, because there's been very little public input. I didn't know if anybody wanted to know about the changes coming up, if anyone had any outside input that we're not getting. That's why I was asking if we're gonna be holding a public hearing for it or not.
Okay.
That's what I was asking.
I got a question. Can't the city council have a public hearing on it?
They can, yes.
That'd be faster and easier in case somebody comes in with a plan if they want to do something.
Right, well, there was already, well, yeah, it doesn't, it's probably the safest, I guess, to just get it adopted. I don't know, either way, I'm fine either way. It's only a difference of a week since
Yeah.
our council meeting is the third Tuesday.
But if we had a public hearing, it wouldn't be until
And then they would go, yeah, you're
in
right.
July, so if somebody comes in with something meanwhile,
It would get pushed to August then, yeah.
and that could be done,
Well, we take a chance, right, but it's, I mean, the material requirements didn't change, it's the color thing that mostly changed. So, whatever you think, I guess, my inclination is that the council's probably gonna wanna adopt it sooner rather than later.
yes.
Is there a timeline for public notice, for a public hearing? Is it 10 days, 15 days?
It is 10
30
days, so,
So
right, we'd
the
have to-
commission could conduct a special meeting for the purpose of conducting a public hearing.
we could,
That'd be
and we,
another-
And we still do have time to have a hearing at council too, so. what
Do you typically do that? Hearing and planning and hearing at council?
No, we
I just
typically do one or the other, yeah.
And you guys are most familiar with this document. That's what makes me wonder whether or not, okay, here you go, council. Read it and wait.
That's
You
why
know,
I'm
be-
like, do we
pick up
want to
the
hold
ball.
it here? That makes sense, so then we've got the most questions back and forth.
Yeah, maybe that's better, and then, the mayor as our liaison would be back, and
Yeah,
we'll do it the end of July then, for
Okay.
a hearing.
host a public hearing for the changes so everyone's gets an idea of what's going on.
Okay, sounds fine to me.
And that works even if we don't extend the moratorium.
What happens?
Oh, no,
Well,
Can't,
I'm
we
saying-
can't.
because we're having a public hearing, I believe it's considered okay,
Okay, yeah, okay.
because, yeah,
But that would be after,
yes.
yeah.
So, yeah, the moratorium ends on the 13th.
So, what you're asking for now is a recommendation to send this to the city council.
No, we're gonna keep it and hold the public hearing here in July.
Yep,
Okay,
And
so
then it'll go
there's
for-
no recommendation, no.
Well, you can
But
make
don't,
a motion to,
don't we want the city council to look at this
no.
before the public hearing?
No, we don't need to do
No,
that.
okay.
Has that been your tradition?
Not necessarily.
No, has it been your tradition that you send it to the council?
only
and then
after it's been
conduct your
approved
public
by
hearing?
us,
Yeah.
yeah,
That-
only, yeah.
That's progression.
Yep, right.
Sorry.
Recommendation first.
No, it's okay, you had the right question.
So what do you want to do with, do with this tonight?
Make a
To
motion
accept
to
this?
hold a public hearing at your July meeting.
Oh, okay. Well,
Made
okay.
with the changes that we discussed.
We've made,
Yeah.
okay. Would somebody like to make this motion, we go to July, that we're gonna have a public hearing with the changes we've suggested here tonight?
It's July 26th,
Pardon me?
July 26th.
26th, July 26th.
I'll make a motion
Okay,
to
Commissioner-
have all these changes that we just discussed put in writing and to have a public hearing for July 26th meeting for the architectural standards.
Okay, Commissioner Perro made the motion. Somebody like to second this motion?
I'll second.
Commissioner Bees seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So that takes care of that. Now, we're gonna go to item 2 here, now having to do with the presenting the basic planning. Who's gonna lead that?
Oh, can I add, I'm sorry, can I do one more thing here? There was a, why is this not working? Why am I having trouble tonight? I'm on slideshow. Well, anyway, you got the copy of the conceptual city center development plan?
Is that what this is?
Yes. Okay. So that's very conceptual, but it's a layout of potential streets and buildings within our city center. And it shows wetlands. Some streets we know, like where the full intersections are at Iguana, and then the one section to the west, those are designated by Anoka County, those full access intersections. But that area south of Viking Boulevard, you know, we'll have a new local street running through there. Actually, there's a large wetland on the Moritz property there that I don't think anyone thought was as big as it is. I checked some various sources and I think there's never been a delineation there, but it takes up a significant amount of that quarter section. Anyway, I guess my point is, this is, a good tool to have. We have something remotely similar that we adopted as part of the comp plan. But it's good to show kind of how the buildings are all lined up at the same setback. It shows, trails. We could go even a little further to show kind of how the parking lots intertwine or connect. I had shown a picture of a farmer's market building, sort of as the entry monument. Did everyone kind of catch that and what I was getting at with that farmer's market structure? Mm-hmm. So the area of the city land, which is currently our park, we've talked in the past with council about, long-term relocating that park or a portion of it to allow, more room for either a city campus or a redevelopment area that would accommodate additional commercial or, I guess, maybe a permanent farmer's market site, a future city hall potentially. Anyway, just general thoughts on that, and, maybe, I would recommend we just kind of spruce it up and make it look more professional. If you kind of like the way it lays out, if there's any changes. Let's just briefly talk about those. And does it make sense when you kind of look at it? And
I have a question.
mm-hmm.
So this conceptual plan is just a creative idea? There's nobody that's actually coming in and says that they're going to be building in any of these spots?
Well, right, we don't have individual, subdivisions right now, right? But we do have specific locations where the streets have to go.
Yeah.
And that's part of, what we want to sort of, I don't know, what's the word? Memorialize here. And then we do have, of course, zoning that dictates right now how these land could be used, if it's industrial, commercial, etc. Yeah, the building locations don't mean a lot, except that conceptually, they're reflective of or some of the concepts in the written part of our changes.
Okay, I guess my one question then spurs from, if you're looking at this map where the word Viking is, to the north of that are some drawn in buildings. It looks like parking spaces, and then it looks like a driving path through the middle of, I don't even know what that's like the landscaping place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm questioning as to why they're driving through there when there's a road to the storage facility right there, and that we had grandfathered the idea that there was gonna be 33 feet on that line there, given when it was gonna be expanded there. Next to the storage facility, and then the word Viking. So right now there's a partial road in there. So I'm trying to figure out why we're,
No, that's just a driveway to the storage.
okay. And it's a driveway to the rear storage lots then.
Yeah, that's a private drive on a storage lot. The road is to the north, which goes way through, connects to Iguana and comes around back down to Viking. But, the county may not allow any access from that nursery property onto Viking. So I was kind of showing that all those driveways connect.
Okay.
And you have to go on Iguana to get back in there.
Okay.
If Viking becomes a divided highway, if they did allow an access, even temporarily, it would come a right in, right out only. So it's just, there's a lot of what ifs, I get it, but it's kind of like a land use plan, right? Where if it's shown on here, if we're expecting trails, if we're expecting, the approximation of where these roads go, that doesn't mean that the road goes in this exact location, but it does help to show this to people and say, look, we've thought about this. When the developers come in, here are our expectations. It makes that sort of conceptual planning first step for these people a little bit easier. And
Okay.
yeah, there'd have to be various subdivisions and whatnot at a later date when we consider the whole
So
picture.
that's what we're kind of looking at here right now, is just a general idea if we all like this or not. What is the green dashed line supposed to represent?
That's trails,
That's what I
so
thought.
just trying to make loops and connections. I think to have a successful central business district, you gotta have trails and they have to connect, and we really have to put some focus on that in our development planning.
Okay.
Where you have residential on the bottom, left side,
It's kind of the southwest corner there.
yeah. Is that zoned residential now or commercial?
Yeah, so the north half, right under the word Viking Boulevard, that 40 is all commercial. And then only the north half going west is commercial. So that's why I showed.
Random.
Okay.
Oh,
I
yeah,
see
there
that.
you go. That one over there. Yep.
Yeah.
On the wall. That's the same thing.
And then that area is really wet, so there was really no road connection possible further south, except through that little subdivision, Country View Acres there, but
Okay, so that section is relying on a road on a neighboring property. Is that?
well, all the roads are, kind of interconnected, right, between properties. So
So-
as, the
This
first-
one exists right here. It's just like a dead end. Not
Okay.
weird? Yeah.
So, yeah, I was just thinking that the far west lot couldn't be developed until the one to the east of it was. I don't, unless they're the same owner anyway.
Well, the county would give a temporary access. They
Okay.
would call it temporary until such time as, if that person on the far west lot wanted to develop, they would have to,
Or this one.
for sure dedicate right away and
Yes.
maybe build that
Yep.
part of the cul-de-sac, but, there may be an interim access onto Viking in that case.
Kind of like they did here. With
Yeah.
the one access here. Until said more.
Is the speed of Viking Boulevard, is that more than 30, 35? I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah, that's 55,
Is
isn't it?
it?
Yeah, it's 55.
Which
Oh, you
is-
mean the speed on the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 55.
So that's not necessarily an asset in your downtown area, right?
Right.
You don't want
No,
people
right.
going, what if you put in roundabouts at both of those intersections? That, I can assure you, slows down traffic. You don't have the maintenance of semaphores. it does generally take much more right of way.
It does.
To accomplish, which is what you've got. You got
Yeah.
all kinds of land up here. So you can take
We just
advantage
redid
of
the
that.
road.
That's a county road though, so I think they would.
have to,
It's,
Pardon me?
it's actually like a major county road. It goes
It's
through
okay,
multiple
counties and
counties.
cities can work together if
Oh,
something happens.
wow.
it'll work. In fact, where I come from, the roundabouts generally are intersecting on city and county roads.
Yeah.
The county's the big dog, they have the big money to be able to do some of those things.
I guess that would be something to look into when they start talking about putting a light right here, at this four-way stop.
right.
Because we know that's coming soon.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd fit one there.
Right, a light?
Roundabout.
No, I mean, yeah, no, but if
I-
you had a light here and then some roundabouts, it'd
I
be.
haven't looked for a while, I didn't see any plans from the county to do any changes to biking, did
We
I?
just redid it.
Yeah.
There's
No,
no-
I'm saying
years
as
ago.
far as
I know.
any other plans,
Upgrades.
yeah, like
Yeah, for a
dividing.
while, yeah, they're talking about like the new 494, right, but they haven't,
It's
Yeah.
getting there.
I don't
They're
even, I
busy.
mean, it's not in their 5-year plan, it may not even be in their 10-year.
Last I saw it, it didn't have any changes in their 10,
Yeah,
I'm not gonna,
But out here, they could put a roundabout pretty easy, because there's some open spaces there.
in the 20 years.
so,
it's
yeah,
been-
something to think about.
Harold, you mentioned possible realignment of 22 where they come across.
Right
All,
here.
all
169.
the way to
Right.
35E is
Yeah.
Right,
what,
right.
what the.
They've been
talk
talking
has
about
been.
that for 25
Yeah.
years.
And then the other thing is 47, you know, the state would like to get rid of it from biking south.
Right,
And that is such a mess, you know, who would want it? But there's more hooks and curves to that thing than, didn't get to be called Dead Man's Curve for nothing.
Yeah.
Well, that one goes back to the stagecoach days, right?
yeah,
Well, it's basically the old horse trails.
Right.
And they went from sand hill to sand hill to go around as much of the water as they could. And if you look at the overview, you take 5 to Anoka, what does it do? It follows the sand hills right down along, and both sides of it had swamp on it. They crossed at the narrowest points.
Those 5 used to be pretty bad too, until they changed the highway.
Oh, there's a lot of them that are bad. Go over to Linwood Township. That follows, it does not have a straight piece of road over there. Crookedy, 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 crook.
so speaking of roundabout, I mean, if you go back and look at Iguana on 199th there, and carrying the one road all the way through to Iguana, what is the idea of that little loop there, just to have a little green space in between, or,
Yeah, it was just
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I'd
a
almost have a
flash and-
roundabout there.
a flash in my head of,
Yeah.
a fountain or a pond
Right.
or, kind of the entry to the commercial area, but,
Go
Right.
put that in the wetland. Just put it in the middle.
yeah.
Would
Yeah,
the
it's kind
idea
of
be-
awkward there.
One way, they'd be one way on each side of that, or, I mean, cause
I
it's
don't
kind of it is a weird area there.
See, it may just be driveways too.
Right.
It wouldn't necessarily be a road.
Yeah.
You gotta remember, you've got water moving 3 ways from this corner out here.
Yeah,
We've got water going north, we've got water going west, we've got water going southeast. Then you go over to Twin Lakes, and we got water that's supposed to be going south and now goes north.
So in a
DNR said
nutshell,
it couldn't be done.
what you kind of have chicken scratched out here, I mean, it works in a general sense of, hey, here's our thoughts behind the craziness in our city. Where are you thinking of building? Kind of, where do you want to build? What lot did you buy? I guess if that's what you're looking for right now, this kind of covers what we're doing, right? Isn't that what this is just to get an
Oh, yeah,
idea, to
just
show
very
someone?
general to say,
Okay.
here, we want the kind of.
It's not set in stone, but it's
Right.
a general idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But you're gonna probably have a few of those landowners along Viking that are not gonna sell for probably a long, long time.
Right.
That's what keeps
Most
us running.
planning efforts, you know,
Well, a
are
good-
30 years down the road, right, at least.
But a good thing to look at is go to Rogers, Minnesota. You come to 116, there's some of the most beautiful homes sitting across the road there. And there is a cattle feedlot, right today, is operating. And apparently he did not want to sell.
Are you talking about the locker plant there?
No,
And
it's
he has every right,
Weber Farms.
yes, he has every right to continue
Yep,
his
and
use,
he can
right?
continue that for as long as, you know,
Yes.
and he also has another farm further up on 116, so. But that's an interesting thing to just watch that, how he operates there. I wouldn't wanna be pulling out onto 116 with the tractors, but he seems to get by pretty good with it, so. And there's not a house on that place to live in,
Oh, really?
on that one. Just the barn and the feeding and the grain storage. But that's a good example of where, and that or farm has been in that family for probably over 100 years, possibly.
Yeah. Okay, well, you know, maybe. Well, it doesn't really matter, I mean, this isn't set in stone. I was
No.
going to say, you know, will this be upsetting to people, right? To look at, we're sort of redeveloping their land, but,
It's not, like you said, set in stone.
yeah, it's
And
really,
it's just an idea of if someone buys a lot, here's what we kind of think, maybe. What do you think, maybe?
well, right, I mean, both farming and nursery, for instance, are not, you know, highest and best use, so it'll happen someday. But yeah, they can use it as long as they want to, the way it is.
It depends on too what actually shows up in the next 25 to 30 years. And we don't know if there'll be a big manufacturing plant. We don't even know in this country if we'll be doing any manufacturing for sure, you know, the way things have went. You know, because it comes and it goes pretty darn fast.
Yeah, lots of changes.
You know, there are a lot of changes going on. Minnesota is not on top of them, so.
Well, okay, so no real recommended changes, I'll just spruce it up a little. You know, maybe I don't get into the parking lot depth and just show kind of the main roads, but,
It'd probably be more helpful, let someone else think of where they want to place their
it'll
building, I
change
guess.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Just the main
Maybe
roads.
instead I do like a little detail showing how, you know, a road could back up, or a use could back up to Viking, and then kind of has parking on both sides, and where the loading would be. As we talked about before, if you've got the two buildings that back up to Viking, the loading could be in the middle, right? It doesn't have to be on the Viking side. Anyway, okay. Well, enough of this. I appreciate the input.
But lots of water to contend with.
Yeah, everywhere.
I mean, you're locked in with natural things that you can't do much about.
You can't do anything about it, and then you add the stormwater requirements.
Because you start looking at the overview, and boy, it really is, you know.
Yeah, it was alarming, yeah, when you start looking at it all. Okay, well, I'll just make it a little more readable and professional. Okay, thanks, group.
What about the upcoming projects?
Well, we're gonna talk a little bit about the zoning principles first as a review for our existing members, and then go through some some of the basics for our new members. Hopefully I can get.
We're going through all those slides? That multiple pages of slides, we're doing that?
If it's not coming up, I wonder what value there would be. Is it
Yeah,
coming
if
up?
it's not, right, let me try this again. I don't know
Well,
what to do.
honest to gosh,
No.
for the public who's watching, first of all, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they're not gonna see anything except us wagging our jaws,
Right.
which is fine. But it seems to me it would be more beneficial to have the power going up. But I appreciate too, you've delayed this how many times? It's been a few times.
I thought we already went through this.
We had kind of phase one the first time,
So this is kind of a fun,
just a little different.
oh goody. Okay.
It's important information. My gosh, there it is.
Well, even if we get through part of it, don't you think that?
It's up to these guys. Look, if
You know, well, we
if you
could-
don't want to absorb this now, then let's not do it. We're wasting one another's time.
But we've got to do it sooner or later.
Eventually, yeah. Well, I hope.
We will have, we're likely to have one application next month at least. Haven't heard from the cell tower people, haven't heard from, Rick Shermer yet, so, but the talk thing is starting up again, up on 47. So they are going forward with that preliminary plat. The preliminary plat first has to go to council and then, the final plat, may come back here depending on how many changes there are.
What's the reading on that Shermer plat as far as street? Up and down?
Well, streets, you said?
Yeah, up and down, yeah, the number.
Well, he's over on, is it, I gotta look now.
Well, you got Twin
I wanna say 200.
Parkway, but it's,
Is Twin Parkway at 204? So he is. Oh, yeah, he's got three sides there, Harold. Twin Parkway, 205th and Baugh.
yep.
Yeah, so he can only get like 5 lots out of there.
Well, there's a water problem, I think, there too, if you go too much movement, if you know what I mean.
Wasn't that right about where they changed it to go north?
Well, it could be where Lawrence got a little happy with his backhoe.
Yeah, I heard about that. But anyway, well, our stormwater review will cover that.
How long is this basics of planning supposed to take us?
Oh, it would probably be an hour, I guess.
Well, we might as well go ahead because it's only 8:30.
You don't gotta get up, so,
Huh?
you don't have to get out of bed in the morning, so we know that.
No, but, we're gonna have to do it sooner or later.
I don't know, whatever, the group.
Whatever you think.
We're gonna have to do it because right now we have a little bit of time, otherwise,
Let's motor through it.
Should we just at least do the basics part, the first half?
Where would
Like
that stop?
Yeah.
Where would that stop?
Maybe at the.
it might go faster than we think it will.
CUP.
Okay, all right, you're gonna take it?
Well, so Liz and I talked about it a little bit, and to save her voice a little bit, and to allow her the opportunity to jump in when I forget something, we thought I'd try to carry the ball here to the extent possible. As each of you know, cities, townships, towns are all legally speaking children of the state, right? So the state legislature establishes the rules of the game for us, not largely, almost exclusively. If the state statute doesn't say we can do something, we can't do it. If it implies we can do it, yeah, we can give it a shot, but sometimes we can get shot down. One of the things historically that the state has really opted to have cities control is zoning. Well, why is that? The presumption was that cities had a better idea than anyone else of what they wanted to be and what the restrictions were and the architectural standards that we wanted to have. Now, we're not left totally on our own, legally speaking, because planning is really broken down into two elements. The building blocks of planning there provide for a comprehensive plan, which is a longer-term plan, as you know, 10 years long, must be approved by the Metropolitan Council, has to therefore abide by their various policies, some of which we may not be crazy about, because they're more urban policies as opposed to some of the rural desires that we have. We nonetheless have to comply with the comprehensive plan policies. And you can see there in the comprehensive plan, it talks about a guide for the city. It's really kind of, what do you want to be when you grow up? City of Nowthen. Local communities can coordinate their comprehensive plans. They have to share them with adjacent municipalities as they amend them. They have to consider the input, but can't be vetoed by a local community. And as I said, the Met Council ultimately is the approving party of the comprehensive plan. We're working on a comprehensive plan now that's for the year 2040. So you can see it's really encouraging long-term thought. And I'm not going to go through the various items on the slide there, but those various elements are largely required to be in your comprehensive plan. Obviously, you have to have a transportation system that serves the community. You have to know where your housing, et cetera, your commercial and industrial is going to go. The very things we've been talking about tonight. And the various infrastructure, et cetera, that you need to try and serve residential, commercial, and industrial. The city's zoning map, by contrast, is a far more detailed document, short-term document, talking about the existing zoning and the requirements associated with, therewith. The direction that map is given comes from the city code. Is that up next? Where our chapters 10 and 11 talk about subdivision requirements and zoning. Subdivision, as it says in the next, is a division of land, lot splits, plats, etc. You deal with that on a meeting-by-meeting basis. Zoning ordinance talks about what is allowed both in principal and accessory uses, setback, home occupations, variances. Again, there's something else that you deal with. So that's kind of the superstructure, if you will, legally speaking, of what you guys are about month in and month out. And what Liz prepares for you is based on these documents, as you all know. There are a couple of things that you should be aware of, and I think all of you are, and let's go through them nonetheless. As a planning commissioner, your job is to take input. Your job is not to share your perspective until all input has been received. And when does that happen? More often than not, yes. Well, but at a hearing. Why are we conducting a hearing on this proposed set of standards? Because while we've put them together, we do want to hear the public's input on them. Why? Well, one, it makes for better planning. It makes for better documents. And oh, by the way, you do have to have the public, to some extent, supporting what it is you're trying to pursue as a community. You know, you just talked about this sketch of your downtown area. Well, if you're not thinking about the future of this community, if the council's not thinking about the future of this community, who is? And so you have to have the courage to pursue some of these things, even though it's gonna cause some public concern. That's where the discussion starts. When we do apply, have a zoning application or something of that sort, don't advocate one way or the other, because you know the people, because you think it's a neat thing. Your job is to stay neutral initially, to receive the input, as I said, to listen to people as they talk, to use your background, your history, your experiences, and obviously the reports and ordinances you receive. When we do receive a petition to do something, whether it's platting or otherwise, there's what's known as the 60-day rule. You familiar with this? Okay. So the 60-day rule basically says, well, it was intended to assure that we, government, moved in an orderly fashion. The 60-day rule does not kick in until they've provided us with a complete application. If we let it kick in before that, we're making a mistake. We should have all the documents necessary to consider that, and then the timing kicks in. And in fact, you can extend that, at least you used to be able, by another 60 days. So 120 days became the maximum. There is something known as the record, or at least this first slide appears under the record. As commissioners, now a majority of you, a quorum, cannot meet at any time without public notice in advance. If you do that, well, a couple of things happen. One, you put yourself at risk. If someone wants to sink one of you or all of you, they'll find a way to say you were talking about business. Two, it's most likely you were talking about business. Why? Because that's what your relationship is. You come together here to consider these things. Although some of you may be friends outside of here, most often, I've seen it happen again and again, the discussion tends to find its way back to planning-related matters. So be very, very careful when you've got a quorum of the body present. Of course, in our case, that is 4 of you. But even when there's 3 or 2 of you together, be careful nonetheless. Because if someone, let's say you find against someone, and they remember this meeting, there are ways that they can come back and try and say that you had a flawed process because you were meeting at non-open meetings to discuss the matter. There's procedural due process. That's the kind of the public hearing, making sure that we publicize these things beforehand, that we state in those notices what it is you're going to be talking about, that we make these materials available on YouTube, for example, so they can watch the meeting and see what you're doing and thinking, so that we publicize the agenda packets themselves. And people are deemed to be entitled to a fair hearing. And that's what some of these laws go together for the purpose of doing. You want to create a record whenever you can, and a record is not something that happens here or here or here. It happens along the entire way. Your discussion tonight was creating a record with respect to this document. The public hearing is creating a record. When you take action on any of these items, you want to create a record, particularly in those instances where you're going to deny, that you have a sense from the discussion you're going to deny. Because you can't be arbitrary and capricious. You can be, but you can be taken to court and you generally get hammered on that. The courts will not look at the reason for your decision, even though they may think it stinks. What they'll look at is, what process did you go through? How did you afford people a fair hearing, and to what extent did it comply with the various laws? And if you complied down the line, generally, the courts will find in your favor, they'll support you. If it's flawed somewhere, someone shot their mouth off at, some party one night and said, well, there's no way in heck I would ever approve that. Someone's gonna jump on that, or the potential is they could jump on that and destroy all of your efforts.
And sorry, one more,
Go for
one
it.
thing, the findings are a huge part of that record.
Yes, thank you.
And listing, the facts about the site and the proposal, and then you move on to listing what the ordinance requires. And then thirdly, you're clear on your decision. What are your reasons for approving or denying something? And all that documentation, is very helpful in the legal part of the system.
And that's what you prepare every time,
And that's
right?
what I do,
Findings of
right.
fact, conclusions of law, aren't they?
Yep, for everything, all the projects that come through, you've all seen the findings. Yours are findings and recommendation, the council's are the findings and final decision. One thing about the, meeting, sorry, I forgot get up back here. The advocating or the being impartial, and then the open meeting law. The attorney Rupi always has stressed, when you get an email from the city hall sent to all of you, be sure you do not hit reply all. If you have a question or a comment about an upcoming project, we're more than happy to help you, but send an email just to Frank or just to me, not to the whole group, because that's even a violation of the meeting law. So that's,
And yet the irony is we can send it to all of you.
right.
Figure that one out.
So sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for doing so. You're covering some important points.
Let's see, what are we, conflicts of interest or
Let's see here. Well,
importance of the record was,
right. Making a record is, so you've conducted the public hearing on this, let's pretend, okay? And there are some concerns you might have, even though you're the originating body. Let's pretend it's not this. It's something else that you finally realize that, no, we can't approve this. This is just not right. Well, the highest incidence of litigation in local government is right here, is when you're talking about planning and zoning. Why? Because that's where most of the money is. Imagine the amount of money these developers are putting in. Just to put together a proposal is $50,000 to $100,000. Especially a proposal that's pretty ornate. When you think about the costs, of consultants these days, it gets pretty significant. And so they're putting that money out there with no guarantee that there's going to be an approval. And so if they feel in any way, shape, or form that they haven't gotten a fair hearing, you're probably going to find yourself in court, especially if you've got a flawed record. Now, what is the record? So you go through the process, you pick up something, Dale, you've got a concern about, boy, I don't think those roads have sufficient capacity. Okay? And they haven't provided good enough road statistics to really convince you that it has. And someone else thinks, wow, there should be more trails in this area because there's going to be a huge populace, and they just don't seem to have that. And just keep using your comprehensive plan, using your knowledge, your experience, if you articulate those things, I have to oppose this because A, B, or C. You can do one of two things. Either that's starting to construct the record, or two, you can say at the point of, well, okay, we've got everything out on the table. You can say, I'd like to move a motion to the effect that we deny this based upon, and you start indicating your litany of conditions, and then you direct staff to put that together. Now, what's the staff do? The staff basically goes through everything, like a vacuum cleaner, and sucks out all of those record items so that your findings of fact, conclusions of law are complete, or hopefully complete. You get to determine that when we bring it back to you. And that is how you make a record, particularly when you're at denial phase. It's not quite so tough if you're in an approval phase, unless your approval runs totally headlong into your zoning or comprehensive plan requirements. Generally speaking, as you know, Liz, you want to, any additions there?
Pick up? No,
Okay.
that's good. The one thing that Attorney Rupi says too is that it's easier to approve something with 20 or 40 conditions, even if that, person doesn't necessarily want to meet those conditions, than it is to deny and have possibly a lawsuit over denial. So, don't ever be afraid to add detailed conditions. The more detailed we are, and we've gotten pretty good at it, we get a lot of interim use permits for like home businesses. We're very specific about, the hours of operation and how many trucks can you park there, and, screening of storage. And we just had a home business that was like a excavating business, and they wanted to bring in crushed concrete, and we said it has to be, limited to 5,000 cubic yards. And so very specific, and measurable, so that when we go look to see if they're in compliance, that, we can tell that easily. And we just did begin a compliance process for IUPs and CUPs. We're starting with CUPs because they're older, and especially the ones that have changed owners, they're not generally being exercised. So, okay.
One thing I did miss here, conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest are almost all the time financial. Are you differentially benefited or punished than the general populace? When you look at something, oh my gosh, I've got part ownership in property or something adjacent, some property adjacent to that, I would ask the city attorney whether or not feel free to tell him your situation. He's not going to share it with anyone else. Tell him what your concern is, and ask him whether or not he thinks you've got a conflict of interest that would bar you from participation in the process. And one of the easiest ways, if he says yes, I would simply say at the beginning of a hearing or any time the item comes up, I'm going to recuse myself. I'm going to go back there in the audience. I'm going to sit down. I'm not participating in the discussion. Well, that's a pretty radical stance, but it's self-cleansing. I mean, it takes you out of the conflict of interest because you're not going to vote on it. By sitting up here, some could argue that you're being influential. Hey, Dale, come on, these are my buddies, and so you just want to watch those things. There are things that are not legal, but they're smell test items. Gee whiz, you're really a close friend of the petitioner, aren't you? No, that's not a conflict of interest. I live in the same neighborhood that the petitioner lives in. It's not a conflict of interest. Now, it's uncomfortable, especially if you're going to vote against what it is that's proposing. But they're not conflicts of interest that take you out of the particular issue. You want to go over variances, etc.?
Sure. So variances are a way of deviating from the strict zoning standards, and the city council is able to allow a use on your property a way to use your property that varies from the strict standard. And the majority of variance requests we get are regarding setbacks. We would never recommend approval of what we call a use variance. So in other words, we would never allow a new home in a commercial zone. We have established standards for the size of accessory buildings. We would never allow a variance for the size of an accessory building. If somebody's 4.8 acres and he has to have 5 acres to have a certain size, no, that wouldn't be fair to everybody else that's had to comply for the last however many years. So those are called use variances, and we don't even consider those. Some cities don't even consider variances for accessory buildings at all. But setbacks are the most common variance. We just had a lake setback for a septic system that didn't meet that 150-foot setback. So, and on some of the smaller lots, variances are usually related to the size of the lot, the shape of the lot, the wetlands, something that's not created by the homeowner. So always a public hearing for a variance also. You've got to demonstrate what the practical difficulties are in complying with the zoning ordinance. And the variance should not alter the character of the neighborhood. So, you know, our side yard setback is 20 feet. If somebody's asking for a 2-foot variance, you know, chances are driving by or living next door, you're not even going to notice that 2-foot difference. You know, if you've got a 100-foot setback requirement and they want to go down to 20 feet, well, that's a huge variation. And is probably not the least amount of variance that they're asking for. So you're supposed to ask for the littlest amount of deviation possible to achieve your goal. So the variances should be and are in harmony with the general purposes of the zoning ordinance. Like I said, having a variance to allow a house in a commercial zone would not be in harmony with our land use plan or our zoning ordinance. Practical difficulties was something changed, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe 20. The state statute was changed to make this reference to practical difficulties. But if what the variance is proposing is reasonable, generally, you know, it's something that we consider. So like the septic system is necessary, right? The owner couldn't control the size of the lot. She's probably the, you know, 5th or 6th owner of this small little lake lot. That's not her fault. She had to find a location for the septic system. If somebody's whole backyard is wetland and they don't have another place to put a pole building, or at least a shed, that's something that we would consider. So it'd be like looking at similar rights, right? Everybody else in the city is allowed that opportunity to build a shed, so we look at trying to accommodate some of those accessory uses.
Some cities will monitor the number and type of variances that they're issuing each year. Let's face it, they take a long time, and they sometimes can be controversial. But more important, they may be indicative of a problem you have with your ordinance, your zoning ordinance, or your subdivision ordinance. Mm-hmm. That isn't apparent until you keep seeing the same variance coming up again and again. You go, maybe we're out of step here. And it's a good opportunity to kind of patch a hole if indeed that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Yep, true story. So anyway, part of the evaluation process, there's 5 or 6 criteria that we look at for approval of variance. So again, just looking at other uses in the neighborhood, and other zoning districts in the city to provide those property owners with the same property rights or benefits. So we can always add conditions of approval to variances, but they have to be directly related to the request. So let's say it's a side yard setback deviation, we could require that they plant trees along that side since they're going closer to their neighbor to sort of ameliorate, is that the right word? The effects of that variance. And similarly, if they're going closer to the road, you know, we might require some other effects that would not, so that the variance doesn't affect the surrounding properties. We're up to conditional use permits now. We have conditional use permits run with the land. And so if a conditional use permit's approved, that stays on the record even if the ownership of the property changes. Whereas an interim use permit goes away if the property is sold. So the old way of used to be issuing more conditional use permits, and now we issue more interim use permits so that we don't have these unused permits hanging out there when the property changes ownership.
Is there a process that the city has implemented to rescind those interim use permits when a property is sold? Is there something that closes the loop?
Those automatically go away. But
Okay.
part of our process that we started to get rid of the conditional use permits hanging out there, the council recommended that we sort of, check in with everybody if they're not using it. Some people aren't even aware that there's a conditional use permit out there. But we have the right as a city to revoke those permits if they're not being exercised, or if they don't meet conditions. So if somebody is operating and they don't meet the conditions of original approval or those that have been recorded, they would be given the opportunity to comply or to amend the CUP. If not, then we would possibly move forward with revoking those. There's been times in the past where we've revoked a CUP and issued a new IUP. It basically gives the owner the same rights, but it doesn't hang out there for years and years. If the property owner or the business is, let's say Joe starts his own business and his son takes that business over, the son can continue to operate from that property as a family member. So again, conditional permit means we establish conditions for proposed uses that maybe aren't permitted outright in certain districts. For instance, we require a conditional use permit for outdoor storage in the industrial park. We want to know the limits of your outdoor storage. It has to be fenced or screened. Another thing that would require a conditional use permit is multiple buildings on a single parcel. They have to be owned by the same entity. There has to be like a maintenance or homeowners association to take care of the property, those kinds of things. So again, conditions like screening are very much commonplace. We are able to define a timeline for a CUP. You can have it no, I'm mixed up. That's for an interim use permit. where you can define like a deadline date. So a CUP does run with the land as long as you're meeting the conditions. If you issue a CUP for like an auto repair facility, that's a home business, and the property sells and the new buyer wants to run the auto repair business, they may do so under that same CUP if they meet every single condition. If they don't, then they have to come back through the city for an amended CUP. Or if the conditions of the use change or are expanded, then the property owners have to come back to us also. So processing a CUP is similar to a variance or an IUP. They all require public hearing. There are certain conditions to meet. And again, we can oppose conditions, but they have to be related to the impacts created by the CUP. And we reserve the right as a city to review a site or use for compliance at any time. Generally, it's done once a year, every other year. And that's the process we'd like to get into, so we have an expectation. There's a lot of older CUPs out there that haven't been looked at in decades. So when we have hearings for these permits, we call it a quasi-judicial capacity when we are processing a CUP. Quasi-judicial means court-like. Similar to what Frank was speaking about, there's a process, there's a hearing. Everybody gets a chance to speak for or against it. Everything goes on record. Once we hear all that feedback, then you make your recommendation and council makes the final decision. So interim use permits, as I stated, are only good as long as the resident lives in the home. So we would not allow, let's say, a house to be a rental house to operate a home business. It has to be the property owner that lives there so that they are in tune with what's happening on the land. Interim use permits can be approved for a certain period of time. They can reference a certain limit. In other words, a gravel pit or a mining permit could be limited to the extraction of 50,000 cubic yards. You can set a date that the interim use permit ends if you choose to. For instance, if you are giving an IUP for a second home on a property, which, by the way, we don't allow, but let's say you built a second home for your elderly parents, like some of the cities are now allowing, kind of like, what's the term, Frank? Almost like a temporary trailer or small second residence.
In-law suite.
Pardon me?
In-law?
Kind of, yeah, but it's not connected to the home. We do allow another unit to be connected to our single-family residences as long as it's all one unit. It shares utilities, shares driveway, shares an address. We don't allow any multi-use twin homes or anything in any of our districts, mainly because we don't have sewer and water, public sewer and water. IUPs can be renewed if they expire. If there are problems with meeting certain conditions, we can actually send a letter or ask that property owner to come through for an amended interim use permit or CUP. For IUPs, we actually put a signature line at the end of the document that says, I agree and understand the conditions of approval established by this IUP. And that's a new requirement. And as Attorney Ruby said, the law is unclear as to what happens if the applicant disagrees with the condition imposed by the zoning authority. I mean, if we impose conditions and they don't sign it and they don't meet the conditions, then we can revoke that permit. So interim use permits allow a use that may not be appropriate at that location in the future, which is why we want them to end. So we put limits on, let's say, the auto repair. We limit the number of vehicles and the hours so that we are not impacting neighboring properties. We don't want this auto repair to grow into a ginormous operation. It would not be appropriate in residential areas.
We have home occupations.
We do have home occupations,
Are they CUPs?
not the ones that don't involve the use of your outbuilding. Yeah, like a haircut person, a lawyer, accountant. You know, some of the ones that just have a home office are just allowed outright. But the ones that use the pole sheds or which park large equipment on the property have to have an IUP. Let's see.
So generally, there's a direct relationship between a property requiring an IUP or a CUP and the capacity of that usage to affect adjacent properties. That's the basic theory, because there are permitted uses. Basically, oh, you meet all the standards, bingo, you're done. There are permitted with conditions. I don't know if we have any of those. And it's kind of a continuum. So you get to the conditional use or the IUP, interim use, and that is really intended to be able to add the conditions necessary to try and prevent future problems associated with either on that lot or an adjacent lots or the area of the community.
So when we get a request for a home business, you know, if you look in the zoning district, which is RRA for the most of Nowthen, the residential areas, it will actually say, here's a list of the conditional uses, and here's a list of the interim uses. And if somebody's proposing a home business that's not on there, you know, let's say they want to manufacture fireworks, well, you know, that wouldn't necessarily be desirable within a residential area. So some of those things we're just going to say no. And if they're not on the list, then they would have to come through first and ask for an ordinance amendment before we even consider the IUP. So IUPs and CUPs are similar, but they can be appealed by property owners to district court, but we would, of course, not hope for that to happen, which again is why we always have very detailed findings of fact and administering our IUPs carefully and with detailed conditions. We keep a copy of all IUPs and CUPs we have an actual spreadsheet now, the dates they're approved, whether or not they're revoked, and we're going through section by section to keep track of those. That is it. Any questions tonight? That was a lot of info for Jamie. But, yeah, feel free to call me anytime or call the administrator if you have questions, after you get a planning report.
Did I advise everyone where we stand with city administrator right now? You want to hear? Okay. So we had 25 people who decided to apply for the position. One then backed out, so we're down to 24. The consultant went through those applications, as did the hiring committee, which is basically Councilmember Blake and Mayor Pilon, and recommended that we reduce that 24 down. No, actually, it had already gotten down to a lower level. Net is there were 14 people ultimately there that were considered. Then the city council got together, and without having any names, because they're semi-finalists, and you can't have names at that point because of confidentiality requirements, they went through that group and came down from 14 to 6. One dropped out, so the 6 were finalists. Now we're down to 5 finalists. The finalists will be interviewed by the city council 2 different days, July 11 and July 14. You can't, if you can try and do 5 at a time, but you get burned out. You're not the same person in the 5th interview that you were in the 1st interview, and vice versa. So the council wants to give them 2 different nights to do that. At the end of the evening on the 14th, the expectation is there'll be some sort of direction. Some 1 or 2 individuals will kind of lead the pack, and the council will either direct that more information be solicited on 1 or more people, or 2, that we proceed to negotiate with one of the candidates to become the next city administrator of Nowthen. Generally speaking, if these people are employed, they're 30-day out people. Normally their contract will say you got to give the council 30 days to leave. Now, if they're already unemployed, which is possible, you don't have to contend with that. And so it could either be 30 days from the date of negotiating and approving the contract, or it could be something less than that. And I've been asked just to stick around however long the city administrator wants me to just try and show them the ropes to the extent that I've learned them in a matter of 6 months. I don't think, my experience has been that's not very long. New administrators want to, hey, this is my place now. It's time, it's my time. You had your time once. So, I just wanted you to kind of know where that process stands as of today.
Thank you, Frank, for the information. Unless we have something, I don't think there's anything else. We've covered what expected.
That's it.
I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Berman, second, and Commissioner Hepela, seconded.
Jorgensen.
Jurgensen, I didn't hear, okay, Jurgensen. Okay, everybody in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned. So this is your first experience,
Yeah.
a lot to digest.